If Iran is weaker, why isn't it losing? Everyone keeps saying Iran is getting hit. So then why does it still hit back? You're analyzing the wrong battlefield. This isn't a strong versus weak war. It's centralized versus decentralized power. Most armies are built like this. Kill the leaders leads to system collapses. Iran built the opposite. No center, no single failure point, no clean victory. Even if you destroy command, local units still operate, proxies still attack, missiles still launch. That's not strength. That's design. Now look at the cost gain. A $10,000 drone forces a $1 million interception. They're not trying to win battles. They're trying to make war too expensive to continue. And then comes the real leverage. 20% of global oil flows near Iran. They don't need a clear victory, just enough disruption to unsettle the system. Oil spikes, markets panic. Pressure shifts from battlefield to global economy. So what are you actually seeing? Not dominance, not victory. It survives impact and spreads the pain. And that's much harder to defeat. Because how do you win against something that doesn't need to win? What if the United States has already entered a war it cannot win, and more importantly, cannot exit? 3 weeks into the US-Israel war on Iran, a dangerous pattern is becoming clear. This is not Iraq. This is not Afghanistan. There are no large ground invasions yet, but strategically, the situation looks familiar. The United States is fighting a weaker power without a clear objective, without a defined theory of victory, and without a realistic exit strategy. And historically, that combination has never ended well. The imbalance in this war actually favors Iran. For the United States to win, it would need to achieve extremely ambitious goals, either regime change or reducing Iran to a point where it can no longer threaten the region or global energy markets. Both are difficult. Iran, on the other hand, does not need to win decisively. It only needs to survive and continue imposing costs, and it already has the tools to do that. The most powerful of those tools is geography and energy leverage. Iran sits next to the Strait of Hormuz, through which nearly 20% of global oil supply flows. Even limited disruption, just a few tanker attacks or temporary blockages, can send oil prices rising instantly. The US does not need to lose militarily to face defeat. If global energy markets become unstable, inflation rises, and allies feel economic pressure, the strategic cost of the war increases rapidly. This creates a fundamental asymmetry. The United States must guarantee stability across the region, protect shipping lanes, defend Gulf infrastructure, and maintain energy flows. Iran only needs to disrupt it occasionally. Even if 90% of Iranian attacks are intercepted, the remaining 10% can have outsized impact. A single successful strike on an oil facility or tanker can move global markets within hours. So far, the US strategy has focused on airstrikes, missile attacks, and targeting senior Iranian leadership. But this approach is already showing its limits. Despite the killing of top figures, Iran's system remains intact. Its command structure is decentralized, allowing operations to continue even after leadership losses. In fact, instead of weakening the regime, these strikes may have strengthened hardline control. The new leadership is even more aligned with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, making de-escalation less likely. This is where escalation becomes dangerous. The United States has several options, but none of them are clean. One option is to directly target Iran's nuclear program by seizing enriched uranium stockpiles stored deep inside facilities like Isfahan. But this would require ground operations hundreds of miles inside Iranian territory, likely facing thousands of defenders. This is not a quick raid. It is a high-risk military operation with uncertain outcomes. Another option is to strike Iran's economic lifeline, its oil exports. Around 90% of Iran's oil exports pass through Karg Island. Capturing or disabling this hub could severely damage Iran's revenue, but the consequences are significant. Any major disruption to Iranian oil exports would push global oil prices even higher, directly impacting the global economy and U.S. domestic politics. Iran would almost certainly retaliate by targeting Gulf energy infrastructure, expanding the conflict further. A third option is even riskier, attempting to destabilize Iran internally by supporting opposition groups, but history suggests that this does not lead to controlled regime change. It leads to fragmentation. Iran could turn into another Syria or Libya with multiple factions, external interventions, and prolonged instability. Given Iran's central position in the region, such a collapse would have far-reaching consequences affecting Iraq, Pakistan, Turkey, and the Gulf. So every path forward involves escalation, and every escalation increases risk without guaranteeing success. This is why the most realistic outcome is not victory, but a prolonged conflict. A war fought through air and sea operations, economic pressure, and energy disruption. A war that does not end quickly because neither side achieves a decisive advantage. And this is where the real danger lies. The longer the war continues, the more it shifts from a military confrontation to a systemic crisis. Energy markets become unstable. Regional actors get pulled in. Global powers like China and Europe begin to intervene diplomatically to protect their interests. What starts as a controlled operation becomes a broader geopolitical problem. At that point, the objective is no longer winning. It is limiting damage. The United States now faces a choice: continue escalating in pursuit of unclear goals, or step back and define a limited outcome that can be presented as success. Because history shows that once a war crosses a certain threshold, exiting becomes harder than entering. And right now, the United States may already be approaching that threshold.
Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to the channel, where we explore the craziest stories, wild ideas, and things you won't believe are real. Smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment. Let's jump right in. The world is in shock as an intense war unfolds between the United States, Israel, and Iran. In my previous videos, I explained why this war began and how much each country has already lost. But in this video, we go deeper. We break down America's master plan, Israel's strategy, and the unconventional doctrine Iran is using even after the death of its supreme leader. We also examine the critical miscalculations on all sides. First, let's understand the objectives of the United States and Israel. What exactly do Donald Trump and Israel want from Iran? Their primary objective is regime change, the removal of Iran's current government, and the elimination of its strategic threat. Trump has openly stated the goal: halt Iran's nuclear program, dismantle its missile capabilities, and neutralize its naval power. At the same time, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made it clear that Iran represents an existential threat to Israel. To achieve this, both countries adopted a doctrine known as multi-domain operations, coordinated attacks across air, sea, land, cyber, and space. This strategy is built on three pillars. First, decapitation strikes the elimination of senior leadership. The assumption was simple: remove the top and the system collapses. Second, air superiority destroy Iran's air defenses and missile systems before they can respond. Third, internal uprising, apply pressure to trigger unrest within Iran itself. Washington and Tel Aviv believed Iran would collapse within 7 to 10 days, but that didn't happen. Instead of collapse, there was escalation. Even after the death of Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei, Iran did not surrender. It launched a massive counteroffensive, over 1,200 missiles and drones targeting U.S. bases in Israeli territory. So how is that even possible without central leadership? This is where Iran's strategy becomes dangerous. Iran operates under what analysts call decentralized mosaic defense. Instead of a single command center, Iran divided its military into 31 autonomous units, one in each province. Each unit can act independently, so when leadership was removed, the system didn't collapse. It adapted. Within hours, coordinated attacks were launched across multiple fronts. Cut off one head and another responds. Iran's second doctrine is cost-asymmetry. A Shahed drone may cost $20,000. A single Patriot missile, up to $4 million. That means for every low-cost attack, the US and Israel are forced to spend exponentially more to defend. Over time, this becomes unsustainable. This is not about immediate destruction, it's about long-term financial exhaustion. The third strategy is regional pressure. Iran targets Gulf infrastructure, airports, oil facilities, logistics hubs. Countries like the UAE, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia become indirect pressure points. If their economies suffer, political pressure builds against continued U.S. military operations. Now let's talk about miscalculations. First, underestimating Iran. The assumption that leadership removal would end the conflict was wrong. Instead, it triggered a more resilient, decentralized response. Second, battlefield saturation. On March 2nd, chaos in the skies led to friendly fire incidents, including multiple aircraft losses. Too many drones, too many missiles, too little clarity. Modern warfare becomes unpredictable at scale. Now the bigger question: why aren't Russia and China stepping in? Russia is tied down in Ukraine, limited by sanctions and resources. China is focused on economic stability, protecting trade routes and global investments. Neither wants direct confrontation yet. Meanwhile, Europe remains cautious. War fatigue, economic risk, and fear of escalation keep them on the sidelines. History gives us warnings. Vietnam showed the power of asymmetric warfare. Afghanistan proved regime change doesn't guarantee control. Iraq and Libya showed what happens when power vacuums emerge. Now those lessons are being tested again. So who has the advantage? The United States has economic strength and military reach, but limited public tolerance for long wars. Israel is highly capable, but smaller, with limits on sustained conflict. Iran is weaker economically, but built for endurance. Its strategy is simple: prolong the war until its enemies lose the will to continue. And this is where the real battle lies. Not who strikes harder, but who lasts longer. Because the consequences are global. Oil prices could surge past $150 per barrel. The Strait of Hormuz faces disruption. Energy markets, trade routes, and global stability are all at risk. This is no longer just a regional conflict. This is hybrid warfare on a global scale. So now the question is yours. Was America's strategy justified? Or will Iran's doctrine outlast its adversaries? If you want, I can turn this into Part 2 Escalation Scenarios. Thumbnail plus viral title package 10-minute YouTube pacing version with hooks and retention triggers. Make a script for 10,000 words, a full 10,000 word. Script is too long to deliver in a single message, but I can absolutely build it for you in structured parts, so you get a complete, high-retention YouTube video series. Here's Part 1 approx. 2,000 plus words of your long-form cinematic script. If you like the tone, I'll continue. Parts 2-5 until we reach 10,000 words. Part 1. The war that changed everything. The world is no longer watching from a distance. It is holding its breath. Because what began as a regional escalation has now evolved into one of the most dangerous geopolitical confrontations in modern history. A war involving the United States, Israel, and Iran. 3 powers, 3 strategies, 3 very different definitions of victory. In my previous videos, we explored how this conflict began and the immediate consequences that followed. But now, the war has entered a new phase. A phase defined not by shock, but by strategy. Because beneath the explosions, the headlines, and the chaos, there is a calculated game being played. A game of endurance. A game of deception. A game where the ultimate question is no longer who strikes first, but who survives the longest. At the center of this conflict is one man whose decisions continue to shape the battlefield. Donald Trump. His objective is clear, decisive, and uncompromising. Regime change in Iran, not containment, not negotiation, elimination of the threat permanently. From Washington's perspective, Iran represents one of the most dangerous strategic adversaries in the modern era. a nation that has spent decades building influence across the Middle East, a nation that has invested heavily in missile technology, proxy forces, and unconventional warfare, and most importantly, a nation that refuses to align with American geopolitical interests. But the United States is not acting alone. Standing alongside it is Israel, led by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. For Israel, this is not just strategy, it is survival. Netanyahu has repeatedly warned that Iran's nuclear ambitions pose an existential threat, not a future concern, not a distant risk, but a present and growing danger. And so, for both nations, the conclusion was inevitable. Iran must be stopped. The only question was how. The answer came in the form of one of the most advanced military doctrines ever deployed: multi-domain operations. A strategy designed to overwhelm an enemy across every possible battlefield simultaneously: air, land, sea, cyber, and even space. The idea is simple in theory. If an opponent is attacked everywhere at once, they cannot respond effectively anywhere. But in practice, this strategy requires precision, coordination, and absolute dominance. And it rests on three critical pillars. The first pillar: decapitation, the removal of leadership. The belief that if you eliminate the head of the system, the body collapses. This strategy has been used throughout history, from targeted assassinations to leadership strikes. The logic is always the same. Without command and control, there is no resistance. And so, early in the conflict, the United States and Israel launched a series of high-precision strikes. Targets included senior military officials, strategic command centers, and ultimately Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. The expectation was immediate: shock, confusion, collapse, a nation thrown into disarray, a military unable to respond, a government unable to function. But that expectation would prove to be the first major miscalculation, because Iran had been preparing for this moment for decades. The second pillar: air superiority. Before Iran could retaliate, it needed to be disarmed, its missile systems destroyed, its air defenses neutralized, its ability to project power eliminated. And so, wave after wave of strikes, targeted radar installations, missile silos, and launch platforms. The goal was not just damage, it was dominance. Control the skies, and you control the war. At least, that was the theory. The third pillar: internal pressure. The idea that war from the outside would trigger collapse from within. Economic strain, psychological pressure, civil unrest. The hope was that the Iranian people themselves would rise against government, that the system would crumble not just from bombs, but from within its own borders. This three-pronged strategy was designed for speed, for shock, for decisive victory. Washington and Tel Aviv believed the conflict would be over within days, 7 to 10 days at most. A rapid operation, a clean outcome, a new government in Tehran. But wars rarely follow expectations, because what happened next changed everything. Instead of collapse, Iran responded, not with hesitation, not with confusion, but with coordination. Within hours of the reported death of its supreme leader, Iran launched one of the largest counteroffensives in modern military history. Over 1,200 missiles and drones, targeting American bases, Israeli infrastructure, and strategic assets across the region. The scale was staggering. The timing was precise. And the message was clear. Iran was not finished. It was just beginning, which raised a critical question across global intelligence communities. How? How does a nation continue to operate after losing its highest leadership? How does it coordinate attacks of that magnitude without centralized command? The answer lies in a doctrine that many analysts had underestimated, a doctrine that would redefine the battlefield: decentralized mosaic defense. Unlike traditional military structures, which rely on centralized command and hierarchy, Iran built something different, something more resilient. Instead of one command center, it created many, 31 autonomous operational units, one in Tehran and one in each of its provinces. Each unit is capable of making independent decisions, launching operations, coordinating attacks, without waiting for orders from above. In effect, Iran turned its military into a network, not a chain. And that distinction changes everything. Because in a network, there is no single point of failure. You can remove the leader, destroy headquarters, disrupt communication, and still, the system continues. Like a hydra, cut off one head and others act. This is what the United States and Israel encountered. Not a collapsing regime, but an adapting one. And this adaptation extended beyond structure. It extended into strategy, because Iran understood something fundamental about modern warfare. Victory is not always about destruction. Sometimes it is about cost. Because what we are witnessing is not just a battle of weapons, it is a battle of economics, a battle of endurance, a battle where the true objective is not immediate victory, but long-term exhaustion. To understand this, we need to shift perspective, away from explosions, away from headlines, and into something far more dangerous, mathematics. Because Iran is not trying to win the war in the traditional sense, it is trying to make the war too expensive to continue. This is what military analysts call cost-asymmetry. And right now, Iran is weaponizing it at scale. Let's break it down. On one side, you have the United States and Israel, two of the most technologically advanced military powers in the world, equipped with cutting-edge defense systems, precision-guided munitions, advanced radar, and layered missile defense networks, systems like Iron Dome, systems like Patriot, designed to intercept threats mid-air, to protect cities, to neutralize incoming missiles before they hit their targets. On paper, these systems are nearly perfect, but war is not fought on paper, it is fought in reality. And in reality, every interception comes at a cost, a very high cost. Now, look at the other side, Iran. Instead of matching technology with technology, Iran changed the equation. It chose volume over precision, quantity over quality, and cost over sophistication. Take the Shahed drone. A simple design, relatively slow, not particularly advanced, but effective, and most importantly, cheap. Estimates suggest that a single Shahed drone costs between $20,000, $50,000 to produce. Now compare that to the systems used to stop it. A Patriot interceptor missile, up to $4 million. An Iron Dome interceptor, between $50,000, $100,000. Do the math. If Iran launches 100 drones, that's roughly $2 to $5 million in total cost. But to intercept those drones, the defending side may need to spend tens, or even hundreds of millions. And that's assuming perfect efficiency, which never happens in war, because interception is not guaranteed. Targets are missed, systems are overwhelmed, and sometimes defenders are forced to fire multiple interceptors for a single incoming threat, 3, 4, even 6 missiles to stop one drone. Now scale that up, hundreds of drones, thousands of missiles, day after day, week after week. This is not just warfare. This is economic pressure. Every interception drains resources. Every defense response burns through budgets. Every day of sustained conflict costs billions, and Iran knows this. This is not accidental. This is strategy, a deliberate attempt to bleed its adversaries financially, not in one decisive blow, but over time, slowly, relentlessly, until the cost becomes politically unsustainable. Because wars are not only fought on the battlefield, they are fought in parliaments, in congresses, in public opinion, and this is where the real vulnerability lies. The United States may have a $900 billion defense budget, but that budget is not infinite. It is tied to taxpayers, to elections, to political pressure. The longer the war continues, the harder it becomes to justify the cost. The same applies to Israel, a highly capable military but a smaller economy, limited strategic depth, and a population that lives under constant threat. For Israel, every missile matters. Every interception matters. because the margin for error is smaller. And Iran understands this. So instead of trying to defeat its enemies in a direct confrontation, is stretching them, forcing them to respond, forcing them to spend, forcing them into a war of attrition. And this is where drone warfare becomes central, because drones are not just weapons. They are tools of saturation, tools of psychological pressure, tools of economic warfare. Imagine this. You are an air defense operator. Your radar lights up, not with one target, not with 10, but with hundreds, drones, approaching from multiple directions, at different altitudes, at different speeds. Some are real threats, some are decoys. Some are designed to confuse your systems. Your job is to decide which ones to confusing, intercept, which ones to ignore, and you have seconds to make that decision. Because if you hesitate, targets are hit, infrastructure is damaged, lives are lost. This is saturation warfare. Overwhelm the system, force mistakes, create chaos, and in that chaos, exploit weaknesses. This is exactly what Iran is doing. By combining drones with ballistic missiles, it creates layered attacks. The drones arrive first, slow, loud, distracting, forcing air defenses to activate, forcing interceptors to be used. Then the missiles follow, faster, more destructive, harder to intercept. By the time they arrive, defenses are already strained, resources already depleted, response times already slowed. This is not random. This is sequencing, a calculated approach to maximize impact, and it works because no defense system is designed to handle infinite threats. Every system has a limit, a saturation point, and once that point is reached, even the most advanced defenses begin to fail. But Iran's strategy doesn't stop at military targets, because the real battlefield extends beyond the front lines, into the economy, into infrastructure, into everyday life. And this is where things become even more complex. Because Iran is not just targeting bases, it is targeting systems, airports, energy facilities, shipping, routes, logistics hubs, places that keep economies running, places that, when disrupted, create ripple effects across entire regions. Take the Gulf states, countries like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar. These nations host critical U.S. military bases. This war is no longer just about power, it's about endurance. The United States, led by Donald Trump, chose speed and precision. Israel, under Benjamin Netanyahu, chose survival. And Iran, even after losing Ali Khamenei, chose to outlast. So the real question is simple, not who is stronger, but who can last longer. Because in this kind of war, winning may not mean victory, it may simply mean surviving.